Welcome to the Next Gen CMO podcast, where we sit down with seasoned CMOs and emerging talents in sales and marketing to explore the wins and occasional losses that shape today's leaders and the strategic maneuvers that can help propel you to the forefront of B2B marketing.
All right, everyone, welcome back to our next episode of the Next Gen CMO podcast. Today, I'm excited to welcome Taylor Hatfield to the show. Taylor is a former collegiate teacher and softball coach who fell in love with sales and recruiting. And today she's an executive sales coach at a company called Lushin. So I'm excited to dive in with her. She's able to help sellers across the board create clarity in their selling through engaging content, great storytelling, really getting to the heart of selling and the energy that inspires change. So we're excited. She's high energy. We are going to tap into that today. We're gonna learn all about her experience in softball and in sales and how they come together and how they relate to authentic selling. So welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it, Kelly. I'm excited to be here to talk about authentic selling, one of my favorite topics.
Very cool. Well, good. Well, let's start where it started. On the softball field, it sounds like. So how did you get into, I assume that's how the coaching started, which then evolved into sales coaching. So how did playing softball take you to coaching it and then into sales?
Sure. I played softball at the University of Kansas. And so after college, I just knew that I wanted to coach. It was something that I wanted to do. I actually took multiple speech classes so that I would not be so reserved and I could actually coach because I was very shy coming out of college. But once I got into coaching, I really found a rhythm that I loved. And because I was an English major, I got to teach on top of that. So it's kind of what led me down that path.
It's so interesting. Just real-time candor right here. I'm in the middle of this college football recruiting for my son. And just this morning, I said, I want to put you in a public speaking class or something this summer because he's meeting with coaches all the time. He's meeting like these people who are offering him like to come play football at their schools. I'm like, you've got to be comfortable talking to adults. You've got to be, eloquent in your text message replies to them. You need to be able to like communicate thoughts. You need to advocate for yourself, but you need to be humble. Like, how do we tap into this speaking? So how did you figure out how to talk? Like, how did coaching unlock your sort of confidence in that area?
Yeah, I think that I had a ton of confidence when it came to softball. I had been playing with my dad in the backyard since I was like 3 or 4 years old. So it wasn't something where I lacked confidence. And so I really poured into that when it came to public speaking and when it came to coaching. And I just found this place of authenticity of like, I have confidence in this. And so coaching really helped me speak publicly because I was talking about something I was really confident in and I could be very authentic to myself.
That's very cool. So tell us how that career progression worked. Maybe just in 2 or 3 sentences, like how did you become a sales coach and what was that path like?
Yeah, well, as you know, teachers and coaches don't make much money. I am a bougie person by heart, but also not. But what I was looking for was just a little bit more stability, right? I wasn't making a ton of money. I wanted other things. I wanted to travel and to be able to do things. And I realized that, I had some friends that were in sales that were doing really well. And so from MLM is where I started. And then I got a traditional sales role in the copier industry. I was there for many, many years, ended up becoming a sales leader in the industry, which is what ultimately led me to becoming a leadership coach and a sales coach here at Lushin.
Very cool. Well, I think that's awesome. So I have the SDRs report into my organization, and we hired them through an agency of former college athletes because we see such a path between the sort of competitive driven achieving mindset of a college athlete and how that can translate into really great sales development rep discipline and operating mechanisms and sort of all the cadences and all that good stuff. What do you see as sort of the parallels there between being a college athlete and being a salesperson?
Yeah, absolutely. Initially I was like, I think every athlete would be a great salesperson. That was my initial thought because, I mean, you're right. The competitiveness that comes with it, the consistency that it takes in order to be successful at that thing. But I think that there is a skill set that can be learned by these athletes. It's really, really crucial. And if they're not willing to learn a new skill set, then it becomes like something that is not great for them, right? But I think that there are many parallels when it comes to being an athlete and being in in sales, I think one of the huge ones is the ability to push through something tough. A lot of salespeople will hit this wall where it's just too tough and they end up leaving the industry. And I think a lot of athletes have learned to push through that wall, and that really helps them when it comes to selling.
I love that perseverance connection, which I think is really, really cool. Well, good. So I know you said one thing you're really passionate about is authenticity in selling. Tell me what that means.
Yeah. So for me, I started in the copier industry, and it's a specific personality that's in that industry when it comes to sellers. They're dominant, they're loud. You always know when they're in the room, and they're always leading the conversation in a way that they're just bold and they're super outspoken. And that's not my personality type. If you're familiar with DISC, I'm an S on DISC. And so I'm reserved, I'm people focused, and I felt like I was putting on a mask every single day that I went into work. And I was exhausted. It was like I would have to go into work, I would put on this mask, I would try to be this person, and I was having success, right? I was having success selling that way, but something was missing for me. I felt like I couldn't show up authentically and honestly, and I felt like people weren't receiving me the same way in selling that they were receiving me in person in life. And so when I started to discover like sales methodology, and I got into Sandler and I discovered DISC, and I was like, oh, I can be authentically myself. I just have to put a skill set with it.
Oh, interesting. What does that mean? What kind of skill set? Like for you specifically, what was that skill set you needed to couple with your S?
Yeah, so I thought that I had to become this dominant personality type. I thought that I had to change who I was in order to be a good seller. But what I was missing was just structure and skill set in terms of navigating those conversations. So for example, a dominant personality type is very direct. They're going to ask you straight up what's going on. That gives me a ton of anxiety as an S person.
That would be me.
Right? Yeah, right. And it's scary to need to ask somebody, are you the decision maker? That's not the right way to ask for a decision maker, right? And so what I needed to learn was the skill set to navigate that conversation in a way that was authentic to me. So now for me, that sounds like, hey, are you shouldering this decision all on your own, or are there other people involved? I can say that and it's authentic to me, and now people believe me. Now I come across as honest versus trying to pretend to be somebody else.
Oh, I think that's really, really cool. Because yeah, it is one of those, like even in my team, like in marketing, I'm like, oh, how do we get them to be more like transformative in the organization, or driving change, or sort of louder on the microphone at our RKOs or whatever it is. And sometimes it's just not natural to some folks. And so I love that you kind of figured out, it doesn't have to be. Like we can figure out some other workarounds using, in your case, sounds like a sales methodology sort of mapped to your personality type that allows you to kind of do it your own way.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's good and bad traits in every personality type, right? In the D, I, the S, and the C. And you want all of those on a team. But the challenge becomes, how do you communicate with each other? How do you communicate with your prospects when they're a different personality style than you? And how do you kind of meet them in the middle? So I always encourage teams to get a better understanding of their team in terms of DISC profile, because it's also going to help them become better sellers. Because when you're selling to a dominant personality type, for example, I tend to go on and on about things whenever a dominant personality style, say like a CEO or an owner, is looking for a more direct answer. So I have to meet them in the middle. And because I know that, then that person trusts me, because ultimately people don't buy from people they buy from people like them, who they feel like relate to them. And so it's just a good way to get an understanding of your team and how they interact with each other and how they prefer to receive information, and realize that nobody's good or nobody's bad. We just have different preferences when it comes to receiving information or giving information.
Interesting. Okay, so you mentioned DISC a couple times. So I know there's all kinds, right? There's DISC, and there's Gallup Strengths, and there's Myers-Briggs, and there's Enneagrams, and all kinds of stuff. Maybe your thoughts on all of them, but why DISC specifically is a good one when you think about assessing your sales personality, maybe?
Yeah, I think it simplifies personalities in a way that makes it easy to understand. The way that it's set up, it's set up to show you who is going to require the most energy from you. So for example, on DISC, it shows me that a dominant personality type is going to require the most energy from me. I have to really try to meet them in the middle, versus like an I personality who's very people-centric, right? They're very people-focused versus task-focused. Then I don't have to try try quite so hard to interact with that person. I have a ton of I friends, I have a ton of C friends, but dominant personality types, there's someone that really exhausts me. It takes a lot of energy out of me. So I prefer DISC over the other ones simply because it simplifies it in a way where you know somebody's fears, you know how they like to receive information, you know their good traits, and you know how they tend to lean or what traits become negative whenever they're stressed. So that way, when like say somebody gets upset with you, or they're throwing a ton of information at you, you realize, oh, this person isn't not hearing me. That's just how they prefer to receive information or give information. And so then you can make it a conversation about, hey, I know that's the way you like to receive information, but this is what I need out of the conversation in order to feel heard and understood. So I think it's good for teams. It's good for your personal life. And it can be like you can use it in both professional and personal life. And it's transformative in both.
Awesome. I love that. I think that's great. I used to have a mentor that told me she manages her calendar by, now she's an executive, like a chief brand officer, but she used to say, I would manage my calendar based on the energy required for those meetings. So she would look at her calendar and be like, I can't do this today. Like, I can't do this meeting and this meeting and this meeting. Like, I will be smoked by lunchtime. Like, can we spread these out a little bit? Can I get some meetings that fill my bucket and then some stressful meetings? But all of one or the other is probably not a productive day.
Yeah, that's genius. I never even thought about doing that, but that's a really great idea.
So when you're talking about the energy level, I'm like, oh, that's true. Like there are just some meetings I feel like I have to amp up for, and others that are a little bit more easy, I guess is the way to think about it. But cool. So tell me, how do you approach your clients? Is that the right word to say? Like, how do you start coaching? How do you assess where the gaps are? How do you figure out like the right approach? How do you measure success if they're able to adopt some kind of, authentic selling behaviors and things? Like, how do you see that path? How does that work?
Yeah. So we believe in benchmarking here. So what we do is we have every client who comes in, they take an assessment. And it's not like a personality assessment. It's not like DISC at all. It's more of a skills assessment. And essentially it benchmarks all of the skills and where we need to work with them. So there's 3 categories with this. There's sales DNA, which are the hidden weaknesses that we carry with us. Actually really, really interesting. It's like a need for approval and how it affects the way that you sell, your ability to discuss money, and are you comfortable with it? What your buy cycle is like. So there's a 1-to-1 ratio in the way that you buy and the way you allow people to buy from you. And then it'll also tell us things like, are they motivated? Do they have the will and the want to sell? This is also really great for hiring, right? When you're trying to hire salespeople to benchmark them this way. And then the last one is tactical skill sets. Are they good qualifiers? Are they good at hunting? It tells us every single skill set that they have innately. And then we take that assessment and we start, where they need the most help at. So a lot of training, they'll just kind of train willy-nilly and everybody gets the same training. But with us, we really believe in benchmarking and starting people where they're at, because it's really important to keep people engaged and to actually have them apply what we're teaching them. And they're not going to apply something if it's just very general knowledge. So we're very application based when it comes to training and when it comes to coaching. And that's why we benchmark everything out. But really our approach is to just address the psychology side of selling. So how people like to buy, and then also address the things that affect us as sellers. There's a certain amount of awareness that you have to have as a seller in order to be able to help that person come to the decision that's best for them. So there's a lot of psychology that goes into selling that isn't usually addressed, and we typically will address that with them because it's what holds them back ultimately.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Do you map to a certain type of methodology or any kind of methodology?
Sandler. So we're a Sandler franchise. So we teach the Sandler selling methodology. Yep.
Gotcha. Okay. I think we use a bow tie, winning by design type methodology, but same idea of kind of mapping to the journey. Okay. Very cool. So one thing I hear, so I'm a marketer, a lot of our listeners are marketers, and and of course we work with sales all day long, right? Because sort of the modern marketer, it's a lot about pipeline and revenue, more so than some of the other things it's been in the past. So some of the challenges we see a lot, and I won't say as much in-house, but some things that we see, of course, with our customers and things they're struggling with, is sales and marketing alignment. So figuring out, how do we bring sellers and marketers together who are sort of potentially motivated by different things, probably wired pretty differently between a marketer personality and a sales personality. How do you coach a seller through that? Or what kind of feedback do you hear about marketing that you then coach back to them?
Yeah. So there's three huge things. Personality, which we've already touched on, having that DISC session and realizing the different personality types and how they want to receive information is really important. Communication in general is important, human interactions. The second piece to that is there's often misaligned expectations. It's really important to set the expectation of what is qualified and what isn't when it comes to marketing and sales. There always seems to be this misalignment of what is truly qualified or the level of qualified that they're looking for. Because oftentimes, when it comes to like MQLs, marketing has a certain idea of what is qualified and sales has a totally different idea of what is deemed qualified. And so when there's this misalignment, then it becomes like a fight. And when that fight happens, then the sales team and the marketing team are almost working separately because there's this limiting belief that the sellers have or that the marketers have. The marketers believe that, I'm going to give sellers these great leads and they're not going to do anything with them. And then on the inverse of that, sellers are thinking, hey, I'm getting all these terrible leads. And what happens is that have you ever heard of the belief window?
No.
So there's this belief window where when we have a belief, we will start to find evidence of it. And then we will start to normalize it. And then there will be an outcome because of that belief. So for example, if I believe I'm not a good cold caller, I'm going to make a few cold calls and then I'm going to be like, see, they didn't go well. There's the evidence. And then I'm going to start to normalize that. And the outcome is that I'm going to stop cold calling because I don't believe I'm a good cold caller. And so what's happening with these leads between marketing and sales is that sales is saying they always give me bad leads. And so they're going to start looking for all of the bad leads and they're not going to see all of the good ones. They're going to normalize that. And then they're going to say marketing isn't giving us good leads. So there's these limiting beliefs that happen on both sides that just need to be flipped, that just need to be, hey, marketing is giving us great leads. And then they're going to start finding evidence of that.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that's a great call because I feel like that's probably true. I mean, in life, right? Like that we all kind of like normalize like stereotypes or opinions or whatever it is that we automatically sort of put things in a bucket and say, well, I know what that is. I know that profile. That's not something I like, or that is something I like. So interesting. And I love the way that you said earlier about people buy from their personality type. I do. Yeah, I mean, I catch myself when I interview candidates drawn to candidates that are more similar to me. I had to learn over the years to like hire people that complement me versus duplicate me because they don't need another of me. They need to fill in the gaps that I have. That's what I need right on the team. So interesting that that's a natural human behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And we see that with sales leaders too. They typically will hire people who are just like them. And then we see this transfer of skill sets where maybe the leader is able to transfer those particular skill sets to that person, but we're missing skill sets because we're only hiring, specific people that have the exact same skill sets because they just see them as similar to them. It's very interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I remember I was at business school. I'm from Texas. And I went to business school in Boston, which is very different culture in Boston than Texas. And I was like an off the chart feeler on Myers-Briggs. And I just had this assumption that like everyone must be a feeler. So everyone wants to like hug me when we meet and everyone wants to like share their like, their childhood dreams or whatever. Like, nope, turns out they don't. And so I had to like learn like, oh, I was assuming that everyone was a feeler like me and realize actually we're in more of the minority, especially in a grad school environment. And I was like, oh, okay, I need to like recognize and meet people where they are and what they're comfortable with and kind of try to close the gap somewhere.
I went through a similar journey. It was like I had this polarized view of people. If they weren't like me and they weren't deep feelers, I was like, oh, maybe they're not a great person. Like I almost had like this very polarized, negative, positive view of them and not realizing that it was just their personality style. Like it wasn't that they were good or bad or that they didn't care about people. It's just that they expressed it in a different way. But I had a very similar journey and experience with that.
Isn't that funny? Where are you from originally?
Originally Kansas.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we Southerners are different. We learn those things. It's the best thing about my son's looking at going to colleges and I would love it to be right here in Texas. And then parts of me with his opportunities, I'm like, maybe he does need to go away because that's the only like he's gonna learn so much and be exposed to so much more world than just right here in Texas.
Yeah, I had lived in Seattle for a while and I actually lived in Europe for a little while. And then I came back and I was like, wow, there's so much more to this world than the Midwest. Like, not everybody's Midwest nice. Not everybody, says hi or bye or holds the door open for you. And it doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means they were raised in a different place.
For sure. Yeah. And that's a great learning. And I think one we don't see if we stay in our own little bubble sometimes.
I agree.
That's cool. Okay. What are there tactical strategies, back on the sales and marketing alignment thing, where you said about kind of resetting those expectations, or like redefining what that box is almost, or window, I think is the word you use, not box. What are some of those tactical ways you do that?
Yeah, so with any limiting belief, there's always an inverse. There's always a positive belief that we can put in place, right? So when you're thinking about sales and marketing alignment, you have to write down all of the things that people are thinking that are negative beliefs, and then you just have to flip them, right? So for example, I am a good cold caller. So then you start finding evidence of that. So really, it's more of an awareness first, and then it is more of an alignment between the two that, hey, we're not going to have these negative beliefs anymore. We're going to believe in each other. A lot of what I teach is the psychology behind empowering people versus leading with fear. When we lead with fear, we're essentially telling that person that we don't believe in them, and that, at any point we'll yank them from where they're at. When I was growing up, I had two different coaches. I had one who would yank me out of the game immediately after I made a mistake. And then I had one coach who let me go 9 games without getting a single hit. And then in my 10th game, he looked me dead in the eye and he said, "Today's going to be the best game of your life." And after I had the best game of my life, like he told me I would have, I promised myself that I would always be that person who empowered other people and believed in other people, even when they didn't believe in themselves. So a lot of what's going on is that sales is not believing in marketing, and marketing is not believing in sales. And so when you just decide to empower each other and to encourage each other and to do what's best for each other and put each other first, that's whenever you're going to start to see true alignment.
Interesting. I love this. I like very tactical comparison. This morning I was talking to my son. Everything that my daughter does drives him crazy. And so he's like, "You're so annoying. You're so annoying. Everything you do is annoying." And I was like, and I kept trying to tell him, I'm like, "You need to like reset your mind here. Instead of deciding that she's so annoying and then you're going to let everything annoy you, instead decide that you're grateful that you have a sister. And let's start there. And you need to learn to block out the fact that this song she keeps singing is in fact annoying, but let's block that out for a second and just show gratitude for the fact that you have a fantastic, smart, beautiful, healthy sister." And he like rolled his eyes at me, but I love this idea of sort of like that reset of like, if we assume intentions are different, like he's like, "She's trying to annoy me all the time." I was like, "She's not. She's trying to entertain herself. She's not trying to annoy you." And so if you can just recognize that she's being herself instead of trying to annoy you, maybe you'll look at the situation different.
Yes, yeah.
That's what you're saying.
There's so much psychology that just human interactions that I don't think that we've been taught, and I don't think that we understand. And it goes into our professional lives, it goes into our personal lives. And the moment that I learned this, all of my relationships got better. I can't even tell you the last time that I truly argued with someone, because I was able to see their point of view and I was able to flip the belief in my head and just say, "Okay, how do I understand this better? What are they trying to teach me versus why is this person so annoying to me?"
Yes. Right. I love it. Yes, I'm going to have you come work with my boys and their sister this summer.
All over it. We'll be journaling all summer.
There you go. That's right. Well, on that note, like, what do you think makes a great coach? Like, what makes you a great coach, or what makes a great coach in general, whether it's marketing, sales, executive, leadership, whatever kind of thing you're coaching, softball?
Yeah, yeah. I think it's leading with empowerment. I think it's truly showing that person that you believe in them and that you trust them, and that when you teach them the skill sets, you then have to trust them to do it. Another thing is realizing that you can never care more than that person. So if you're a sales leader and you have a seller and you care, 80% and they care 20%, you're never going to get that person to where they need to go. You can never care more than that person. And so there's a lot of things that I've had to release in my life and attachments that I've had to release. And my new motto is, you care 51%, I'll care 49. But I'm never going to be the person who cares 51%. And I think that that's what makes all of us here at Lushin a great coach, is because we want to help the people who want to help themselves. And we're releasing that attachment of trying to pull people along, trying to pull teams along. If they're not in a place where they're ready to fully commit, then it's impossible to empower them. And I think on the other side of that, I think that it's not about convincing anybody to do anything. A lot of people think that in order to coach someone, you have to convince them. You have to, tell them what to do or, be in control all the time as a leader. And what actually makes you a great leader is when you release control and you trust your people and you trust, the framework and the structure that you've put around it and the skill sets that you've taught them. And you let them prove to you that they can do what they do. And I think that that's what makes a really good sales leader.
Okay, there's so much in that. I love the empowerment idea. I love the care slightly less than they care. I tell my daughter that too. I'm always like, you need to find somebody who loves you tiny fraction more than you love them. Like, it's always a good thing for a husband to love you slightly more. It's a good thing. It'll change, it'll balance out over time, but at least while you're dating, I think that's a good thing. But I love this idea of making sure that you're helping the ones who want to help themselves. And that is counter to the fear statement that you made before. You were talking about the balance of like a coach who coaches with fear. And, I've certainly played for that coach. I played sports my whole life and I've played for that coach. And yeah, there you're tiptoeing around not making a mistake. Like confidence out the window. It's all about just don't screw up. And so you're nervous about every move. Every move could result in pulling you out of the game, pulling you out of the lineup, moving you to the bottom of the batting order, whatever it is, like happens in that. And then there's the empowerment side where you're like, man, I can play for confidence. I can go for jump balls. I can go for all the things. So I love this idea. Tell me the counter side of that. If you care too much and they're only operating out of fear, what happens?
Yeah. So I'll just take it to the sales side. It's a little easier to explain that way. When a sales leader is leading out of a place of fear for their people, think about that seller's mentality. They have a quota that they need to hit. So now they're operating out of a place of scarcity versus a place of abundance, which means they're not going to qualify as good. They're going to let deals sit in their pipeline because it looks good, but not because they're necessarily qualified. They are going to not push people to make the decisions that they really need to make, which again is going to cause a delay in the sales process because they're afraid that if they push too hard, they're going to lose that deal. And then they're not going to be able to hit their quota. They're not going to make better decisions. They're basically operating out of a place of, oh crap, if I don't do this, I'm going to be out of a job. And so when they operate out of a place like that, they're not actually selling and they don't have the opportunity to get good. But when we operate out of a place of empowerment, we're letting that person confidently show up the way that they are, and we're letting them make the mistakes that they need to make in order to get good. Now, if you're, in a startup or something like that, and you can't afford for somebody to make a ton of mistakes, that's when you need to hire someone based on skill set. We still have to empower them in a way that allows them to make good decisions and I wouldn't say don't force a quota on them because everybody has to have a quota. They have to carry a number, but don't force the idea of if you don't hit this number this quarter, we're going to let you go, because then they're going to be operating out of that place of scarcity again. And they're not going to be, getting the deals that they actually need to get. And commission breath, right? Commission breath is a real thing where they're going after something and they're just pushing and pushing and pushing. And they're not actually helping that person come to the best decision for them, which is really going to not only hurt them and their mindset when it comes to sales, but it's also not good for the prospect and the clients that they're bringing in because they're not going to bring in the clients that they should be bringing in.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Tell me that term commission breath. What's the definition of that for people who are listening?
Yeah, commission breath. This is when you can tell that a seller has to hit a number or that they are pushing for that sale. It's basically showing up and like you're drooling,
It's desperation.
Really, yeah, right. Straight desperation. They really, really want that deal, and they look like they're super attached to it. That's the problem, is that they have not detached themselves from the outcome, and you can tell that they care if they get that deal or not. And the whole point of showing up differently in sales, which is what we teach, is because when there's a buyer-seller dance, so in any other conversation, it doesn't matter how you show up, right? But in a buyer-seller conversation, when you show up that way with commission breath, you immediately send off this is a seller alarm in that buyer's head, and they're going to treat you differently. But when you don't care, when you care a little bit less than they do about what's happening, then all of a sudden they're like, oh, this is just a conversation. This isn't a buyer-seller thing. This is just a conversation. You're now an advisor. You're a consultative seller versus somebody who has commission breath.
And they're probably not going to try to lowball you on the price either, maybe, as much. If you're desperate, it seems like they're going to go like, oh, man, I can get this guy to sign anything.
Also that, yeah, it's to your detriment as a seller, and it's also to their detriment because they're like, I don't even know if I can trust this person. They just seem like they want the deal. They're not actually trying to help me and my company. They're just trying to make a sale.
Awesome. Okay. I think this is super helpful. I want to actually share it with our whole marketing and sales teams and be like, just listen to some of this. Like, there's a lot of this. It's a great thing to just help facilitate. We have great sales marketing alignment, but I think it's always helpful to make sure we're sort of very intentional about it as well. Well, cool. Well, so one last question before we leave, just to end on a fun note. What's a fun fact about you that maybe people don't know?
Oh my gosh. Oh, I have one. I have a list of my top 10 mac and cheese places in the United States. So anytime I go to a restaurant, I will get mac and cheese. I know I'm a child, but I just love mac and cheese so much. And so I have this list, it's in my head, of my top 10 places for mac and cheese. And my number one place is this place in Chicago. And the name escapes me right now, but it is a place in Chicago that is kind of in the downtown Chicago area. But yeah, I have a mac and cheese list of the best mac and cheeses.
Okay, I love some mac and cheese. To me, it's one of my favorite foods too. So, is it mac and cheese, or is it like green chili mac and cheese, lobster
I'm
mac
okay
and
with
cheese?
that. I'm
You go
okay
with
with
all the things.
additions. Yeah, I'm not like a big like chili mac and cheese fan, but if there's like little bacon bits or peppers in it, I can hang with that. That
You can
sounds
hang with that. Okay, I love that. Yeah, well, if you happen to ever write that list down, please send it to me because
Oh,
I'd
I
love
will.
to
Yes,
try.
I will
Okay,
for sure.
awesome. Well, cool. Well, hey, if listeners want to learn more about you or contact you or need sales coaching help or anything, where should they go to find you?
LinkedIn is the best place. I'm super active on LinkedIn, always messaging people back on there. And then I also have a book an appointment link that's on my profile that people are welcome to use where they can book directly with me and have just a quick 15-minute chat and see if it makes sense for them.
Oh, very cool. That's great. So Taylor Hatfield on LinkedIn, you guys go find her. And Taylor, thank you so much for coming today. It was such a gift to have you.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. This was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Good. And thank you everyone for listening to our podcast. We'll see you on the next episode of the Next Gen CMO. Thanks everyone.